The corporate boardroom was completely silent except for the sound of an expensive fountain pen tapping against a glass table. I watched the newly appointed chief operating officer throw around terms like operational agility and lean optimization as if he had just discovered fire. He adjusted his tailored suit jacket, flashed a practiced grin, and waited for applause that never came. 3 chairs away, I sat perfectly still, knowing that his ignorance was about to trigger an absolute catastrophe. The executive team viewed me as a line item on a budget spreadsheet, an outdated fixture of a bygone era. For over a decade, I had silently guided this corporation through federal audits, massive regulatory shifts, and high-stakes financial investigations. My office desk was a carefully managed chaos of red ink documents and compliance manuals, each representing a crisis I had quietly neutralized before it reached the executive suite. They completely forgot that I built the entire regulatory framework from scratch. As the weeks rolled on, my name began mysteriously disappearing from critical meeting invites and leadership email distributions. The new operational strategy involved slashing departments that the executive team simply did not comprehend, starting directly with my compliance division. I watched silently as junior analysts with zero regulatory background took over vendor review pipelines and legal checkpoint protocols. They treated my 14-year tenure like background wallpaper, completely unaware of the structural foundation I was holding together. The breaking point arrived during an ordinary mid-quarter financial review, sandwiched between minor budget cuts and office supply restrictions. The arrogant chief operating officer looked directly at me, offering a condescending smile before announcing that my role was officially outsourced. He claimed a global partner would handle the regulatory framework moving forward to maximize corporate efficiency. The room remained incredibly tense as he dismissed a decade of specialized expertise with a simple wave of his hand. I did not argue, raise my voice, or show a single ounce of visible frustration to the boardroom. Instead, I calmly reached into my bag and placed my black corporate credential directly onto the center of the table. The laminated ID featured an official federal seal alongside a bright orange tag designating me as the sole authorized signatory. The finance director immediately stopped smiling, staring at the plastic card like it was a live explosive device. The chief operating officer let out a mocking laugh, asking if the badge presentation was my dramatic version of a workplace protest. I looked him dead in the eye, maintaining complete composure, and explained that it was merely standard corporate protocol. He scoffed, claiming their offshore team could easily handle standard government filings and that I overcomplicated the entire system. That specific comment was the exact moment he sealed the entire company's fate. I handed an encrypted data drive to the human resources representative, who was visibly sweating under the boardroom lights. I calmly explained that the drive contained my final regulatory sign-offs, pending risk disclosures, and active contract validations. I noted that they had exactly 40 minutes to upload the files before my administrative credentials permanently expired. A wave of profound discomfort instantly swept through the room, though nobody wanted to admit they were terrified. The legal director unmuted his microphone from a remote connection, suddenly sounding frantic as he questioned what credentials I was referring to. I chose not to answer, instead standing up and smoothing down my blazer with deliberate precision. The chief operating officer offered one final patronizing remark, suggesting I enjoy my early retirement and focus on casual hobbies. I simply smiled, wished them the best of luck with the federal databases, and walked out. By Saturday morning, I was sitting at my kitchen counter, completely disconnected from the corporate network and enjoying the absolute quiet. My late husband always joked that my obsession with regulatory backups made me completely bulletproof in times of corporate crisis. I opened my personal terminal and systematically revoked my multi-factor authentication codes from every federal portal. The IRS liaison network, the defense contract system, and the encrypted internal ledgers were completely wiped of my clearance. Once I was digitally erased from their infrastructure, I picked up my landline to make one critical phone call. I dialed a direct number for the Office of the Inspector General, connecting with a senior liaison I had known for years. When I informed her that the company had eliminated my position and outsourced the framework, the line went dead silent. She knew exactly what that meant for the company's active government defense contracts. Years ago, the executives had completely botched a federal filing, nearly destroying their entire financial standing with the government. I spent 3 consecutive days locked in my office, drafting a complex regulatory exemption that saved the organization millions. The strict condition of that federal exemption required a certified compliance officer with verified tenure to manually sign off every quarter. That name was mine, and it was the only authorized signature the government recognized. I spent the rest of the weekend contacting my personal legal counsel and notifying oversight agencies of my immediate departure. I submitted a formal 1-sentence disclosure stating I no longer represented the corporation in any regulatory or fiduciary capacity. There was absolutely no anger or dramatic flair in my messages, just a perfectly executed line in the sand. I closed my laptop, poured a glass of wine, and watched the evening breeze move through the trees. Monday morning arrived at the corporate headquarters like an absolute sledgehammer straight through the front glass windows. The company founder arrived hours ahead of his usual schedule, marching past the reception desk with a pale face and a clenched jaw. He slammed his office door so hard the glass partition rattled, immediately summoning the chief executive officer inside. Within minutes, an emergency notification went out to every major department head with a maximum red alert status. By the time the arrogant chief operating officer sauntered into the executive boardroom, the atmosphere was completely toxic. The founder slammed a printed federal notice onto the table, demanding an immediate explanation for what was happening. The document stated that the corporation's fourth-quarter regulatory standing was officially non-compliant, freezing their active status. The chief operating officer tried to brush it off as a temporary system glitch caused by my sudden departure. The vice president of finance interrupted, his voice visibly trembling as he turned his laptop toward the leadership team. He explained that their entire access to the federal vendor database had been completely revoked at the dawn of the business day. The system showed that my deactivated credential was the sole anchor holding their government authorization active. The chief operating officer arrogantly ordered them to simply reactivate my profile, completely blind to reality. The finance director explained that my ID was a federally verified liaison designation that could not be duplicated by internal IT. The chief executive officer turned completely white, realizing that nobody else in the entire building possessed the legal authority to file reports. The founder demanded to know why a backup officer had never been trained or registered over the past several years. Legal counsel finally spoke up, reminding the entire room that they had skipped those specific training budgets. The chief operating officer frantically suggested they simply submit the quarterly documentation using my old digital profile to buy some time. The head of legal looked at him with absolute disgust, stating that doing so would constitute immediate federal fraud. She informed the board that I had already filed my formal removal paperwork with the government hours prior. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on the room, and the panic was absolute. By Tuesday afternoon, the corporate infrastructure was experiencing a complete and total operational meltdown as systems locked out users. Government contractors were sending immediate notices of contract breach, halting all incoming financial transfers and freezing active project collaborations. The internal software platforms began rejecting electronic signatures, displaying massive red banners indicating an invalid compliance structure. The brilliant strategy of outsourcing my department had effectively neutralized the entire corporation within days. In a final act of desperation, the founder bypassed his executives and dialed my personal cell phone late that evening. When I answered, his voice sounded incredibly small, stripped of all the corporate bravado he usually carried. He asked me directly if I had intentionally disabled their core systems before walking out the door. I simply told him that I had done nothing of the sort, but had merely taken my name off the deed.